stars had been talking for thousands of years, but Earth never said a word back. Across the galaxy, every world that held intelligent life sent out signals into space. They built giant towers that reached toward the heavens and broadcast their thoughts, their music, their dreams to anyone who might be listening. The cosmic web hummed with conversations between distant worlds, trade agreements flowing through quantum channels, and the constant chatter of a galaxy full of life. But from the third planet orbiting a yellow star in what the galaxy called Sector 7739, there was only silence. Commander Thexfell stood on the bridge of his crystalline ship, his body made of living mineral that caught and reflected the light of 1,000 stars. His people, the Vorthok, had been exploring space for over 10,000 years. They had seen worlds covered in oceans of liquid methane, planets where trees grew upside down from floating islands, and civilizations that lived inside the hearts of dying stars. Yet Earth puzzled him. "Sir, the atmospheric readings are quite fascinating," reported his science officer, a younger Vorthok, whose crystal skin still showed the blue tint of youth. "Oxygen, nitrogen, water vapor. The chemical signs suggest life, possibly even complex life." Thexfall let out a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, which was how his people showed mild interest. And yet they send no signals. No quantum pulses, no radio waves, nothing at all. How primitive must they be? 3 sectors away, the Nexari were having a similar conversation. Unlike the crystal beings of Vorthak, the Nexari shared one mind among billions of bodies. When one Nexari learned something, they all knew it instantly. They moved like a perfectly choreographed dance. Millions of individuals acting as one consciousness. The Nexari had long ago decided that Earth was what they called a pre-contact world, a planet, where life had begun but had not yet developed the ability to reach beyond its own atmosphere. Their records showed that Earth had been quiet for as long as anyone had been listening. In their vast shared memory, Earth was filed away under worlds to check again in another 1,000 years. The ancient Solari beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form eons ago barely noticed Earth at all. They communicated through patterns of light that crossed entire star systems in moments. To them, any species that could not manipulate energy itself was hardly worth considering. Earth was just another rock floating in space, no different from billions of others for 300 Earth years. The Galactic Council had listed Earth in their databases with a simple classification: silent world, primitive life probable, no contact protocol required. Ships occasionally passed through the Sol system on their way to more important destinations, but none bothered to slow down for a closer look. Trade routes were established that curved around Earth's solar system like a river flowing around a stone. The great merchant fleets of the Vorthok carried their precious crystals to the manufacturing worlds of the Nexari. The Solari provided energy technology to younger species in exchange for rare minerals. Hundreds of other civilizations bought, sold, traded, and talked across vast distances, their voices creating a symphony of galactic civilization. And still, Earth said nothing. The silence became so normal that most species forgot Earth existed at all. It was just another entry in the vast catalogs of worlds filed somewhere between the gas giants where the Methic lived in floating cities and the ice planets where the Kryzen had built their frozen empires. Commander Vexville had been assigned to patrol this quiet section of space precisely because nothing ever happened here. It was considered a peaceful posting, perfect for an officer nearing retirement. He spent his days cataloging asteroids and updating star charts occasionally, dealing with a lost merchant ship or a minor pirate raid. Earth was just another item on his list of things to check on, like making sure the automated beacons were still working, or that no one was illegally mining the asteroid belts. The few times Earth did come up in conversation, it was usually as a joke. Young officers fresh from the academy would sometimes bet on what they might find if they ever bothered to scan the surface closely. Some guessed primitive villages, others thought maybe simple agriculture. The more imaginative ones suggested that perhaps the inhabitants lived underground or underwater, which might explain their silence. But even these idle speculations were rare. In a galaxy full of wonders, worlds where the rain fell upward, species that lived in the cores of stars, and ancient machines that had been calculating the meaning of existence for millions of years. A quiet little world in an unremarkable system held no fascination for anyone. The great wheels of galactic civilization continued to turn. Trade flowed along established routes, and the constant background noise of interstellar communication filled the cosmic void. Somewhere in all that noise, Earth remained a small, silent island, apparently unaware that it was surrounded by an ocean of voices calling out across the darkness of space. None of them suspected that Earth's silence was not because it could not speak, but because it had chosen to listen instead. The alarm that woke Captain Mortian from his meditation cycle was not the urgent shriek of a battle alert, but the gentle chime that meant something interesting had been discovered. As part of the Nexari collective consciousness, he instantly knew what his sensor operators had found without needing to ask. Unusual energy readings from the Sol system, the same quiet corner of space that had been ignored for centuries. Mortian stretched his forearms and checked the data flowing directly into his mind. The energy signatures were strange, not quite matching any known technology, but definitely artificial. It looked like the primitive inhabitants of the third planet had finally discovered basic power generation. Perhaps they had learned to split atoms, or maybe even figured out simple fusion reactors. "Looks like the silent world is finally growing up," he said to his bridge crew, who all nodded in unison. When you share thoughts with your entire species, conversations were often unnecessary. But Mortian enjoyed the old traditions. The standard protocol for newly discovered civilizations was simple, and had been used thousands of times before. Send a small fleet to observe from a safe distance, attempt communication, and figure out what level of technology they had achieved. Most species were still fighting with metal weapons and burning fossil fuels when first contact happened. The Nexari would introduce themselves slowly, share some basic knowledge, and either welcome the new species into galactic civilization or politely suggest they call back in a few hundred years. Mortian assembled 3 ships for the mission. It was more than enough to handle any possible threat from a species that had just learned to generate unusual energy readings. His flagship, the Mindbridge, was a sleek vessel that could outrun anything and had enough firepower to destroy a small moon if needed. The other 2 ships carried scientists, linguists, and cultural specialists who would help make the first contact go smoothly. The journey to Earth took 2 days at standard cruising speed. There was no hurry, and Mortian used the time to review everything the Nexari knew about the Sol system. It was not much. The third planet had liquid water, breathable atmosphere, and what appeared to be a single large moon. Long-range scans had detected cities on the surface, but they seemed small and primitive. The inhabitants appeared to be bipedal, roughly humanoid, and had only recently developed the ability to leave their planet's surface. As the 3 Nexari ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, Mortian felt confident this would be a routine mission. He had made first contact with dozens of species over his long career. The pattern was always the same: initial fear, gradual curiosity, and eventually excitement at learning they were not alone in the universe. The Mindbridge began broadcasting the universal greeting on 17 different quantum frequencies. The message was simple and had been crafted by the galaxy's best linguists to be understood by any species that had developed basic mathematics and physics. It used prime numbers, simple geometric patterns, and gradually introduced more complex concepts. By the end of the transmission, most species could understand that they were being contacted by friendly visitors from another world. Mortian settled back in his command chair and waited for the response. Usually it took anywhere from a few minutes to several hours for a new species to figure out how to respond. Some tried to answer with primitive radio signals. Others attempted to communicate by flashing lights or even by arranging large net objects on their planet's surface in geometric patterns. The first response came exactly 47 seconds after the transmission ended. This was unusually fast, suggesting that the inhabitants of Earth had been monitoring their communications and had prepared a response in advance. Morshan felt a small flutter of interest. Perhaps this species was more advanced than their initial scans had suggested. But instead of the crude radio signal or confused mathematical response he expected, the communication channel fell completely silent. Not the empty silence of a dead transmission, but the focused quiet of someone who was listening very carefully and choosing their words with great precision. When the voice finally came through the speakers, it sent a shock through every Nexari on all three ships. The shared consciousness that connected them all rippled with surprise and growing alarm. The voice was speaking perfect Nexari standard, the complex language that had taken their species thousands of years to develop. The pronunciation was flawless, the grammar sophisticated, and the tone was calm and controlled. "Welcome to Earth," the voice said, as if greeting old friends who had arrived for a planned visit. "We have been waiting for you." Morshan's 4 hands gripped the arms of his chair. In all his years of first contact, no species had ever responded in galactic standard language. Most could barely understand the mathematical concepts in the universal greeting, let alone speak the complex tongue of their visitors. "This is Captain Morshan of the Nexari Collective," he replied, his voice carefully neutral despite the shock. Running through his consciousness, "We received unusual energy readings from your system and came to investigate. May I ask who I am speaking with?" "My name is Dr. Hayanki," came the reply, still in perfect Nexari standard. "I represent the United Earth government. We have been monitoring your communications for some time and have been hoping for this opportunity to meet you properly." The implications hit Morshan like a physical blow. If the humans could speak Nexari standard, they had been listening to galactic communications for years, possibly decades. The silent world had not been silent at all. They had been listening, learning, and preparing. Dr. Hankey walked through corridors that stretched for miles beneath the mountains of Korea. The walls hummed with energy from machines that no alien species had ever seen before. Behind him, 3 very confused Nexari delegates tried to understand what they were looking at. Their shared consciousness buzzed with theories and growing alarm as they realized that nothing they had believed about Earth was true. Engineer Soman looked up from her workstation as the group approached. Her fingers danced across controls that managed quantum listening arrays spread across 12 different continents. The screens around her showed conversations happening right now between worlds hundreds of light years away. Trade negotiations between the Vorthok crystal miners and the gas-breathing Zelani. Military communications from the aggressive Karathi Empire as they planned their next conquest. Even the energy patterns of the ancient Solari as they discussed. Philosophy in languages made of pure light. Dr. Hyenki Salman said in Korean, then switched to perfect Nexari standard when she noticed their guests. The Karathi are mobilizing their 7th fleet again. Should I redirect the listening post on Europa to track their movements? Captain Morshan's mandibles clicked together in shock. Europa was one of Jupiter's moons, and if the humans had listening posts there, it meant they had been traveling through space far longer than anyone suspected. "You have installations throughout your solar system?" he asked. "Oh yes," Dr. Hyenki replied casually, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "We have been expanding quietly for about 60% of your standard years." Nothing too obvious, of course. "We learned early that making noise in this galaxy tends to attract the wrong kind of attention." He led them into a vast chamber where a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy rotated slowly in the air. Thousands of colored dots marked the locations of different civilizations, trade routes, military installations, and resource deposits. The detail was incredible, showing information that some species kept as closely guarded secrets. "This is remarkable," whispered one of the Nexari scientists. "This level of intelligence gathering would take our best spy networks decades to compile." Salman smiled and touched a control panel. The galactic map zoomed in to show the Nexari home system in perfect detail. "We have been listening to your internal communications for 23 years, she explained. "Your collective consciousness makes you very efficient, but it also means you sometimes forget that others might be listening when you share information across your networks. The Nexari delegates exchanged looks of growing horror. If the humans could intercept their collective communications, they knew everything about Nexari society, technology, and military capabilities. Dr. Hyanki gestured to another section of the command center, where teams of humans worked at stations monitoring different parts of the galaxy. When we first detected your signals, we faced a choice, he explained. We could announce ourselves immediately and join galactic civilization as newcomers. Or we could stay quiet and learn everything we could about our neighbors before revealing ourselves. The universe taught us that the second option was wiser, Salmin added, bringing up historical records on her display. We watched the Karathi Empire conquer 17 peaceful civilizations in the past 50 years. We saw how the Vorthok used their crystal technology to control trade routes and force smaller species into unfair agreements. We observed how even the peaceful Nexori sometimes relocate entire populations when it suits their collective needs.
Captain?
Mortian felt the shared consciousness of his people reeling with the implications. You have been watching us for decades, learning our languages, studying our technology, and we never knew you existed. Not just studying, Dr. Hyanki corrected gently, improving. When you listen to thousands of different civilizations, talking about their discoveries, their failures, and their successes, you learn very quickly. We did not have to spend centuries making the same mistakes that others made. We could skip ahead. He led them to a viewing window that looked out onto a construction bay. The Nexari delegates pressed against the glass and stared at ships that looked nothing like any technology they had ever seen. The vessels seemed to bend light around themselves, and energy patterns flowed across their hulls in ways that defied known physics. We took the best ideas from everyone, Soman explained. Vorthok crystal matrix technology, but improved with better quantum resonance. Solari energy manipulation, but focused through mechanical systems instead of pure thought. Even some concepts from your own collective consciousness research applied to our computer networks. But how? Captain Mortian asked, his voice barely a whisper. How did you advance so quickly? Our species took thousands of years to develop. Interstellar flight. Dr. Hyanki turned to face the alien delegation directly, because we had teachers, even if they did not know they were teaching us. Every signal you sent, every conversation you had, every technical manual you transmitted to your colonies became our textbook. We learned from the combined knowledge of hundreds of civilizations. While you were calling Earth silent, Salman added with a slight smile, we were taking notes. The revelation was spreading through the Nexari collective consciousness like ripples in a pond, across their home worlds, billions of Nexari minds. Were processing the impossible truth. The primitive planet they had ignored for centuries was not primitive at all. It had been the greatest intelligence operation in galactic history, and they had been completely unaware of it. Earth had not been silent. Earth had been listening. Admiral Jiho stood on the bridge of the silent storm, watching the largest war fleet in galactic history emerge from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. 10,000 Karathi warships spread across space. Like a dark cloud, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. For any other world, this would have been the end of everything, but Earth was not any other world. Sir, enemy fleet is taking attack formation, reported Captain Yunji from her tactical station. Her fingers moved across controls that managed not just the silent storm, but coordinated with every human ship in the system through quantum links that the Karathi had never seen before. They are broadcasting surrender demands on all frequencies. Jiho smiled grimly. The Karathi message was simple. Surrender now and become slaves, or be destroyed completely. It was the same offer they had made to dozens of worlds before turning them into smoking ruins. But the Karathi had made one critical mistake. They thought they were attacking a newly discovered civilization that had just learned to travel between stars. All ships, this is Admiral Jiho, he spoke into his communicator. Remember, we have been preparing for this day for 40 years. Show them what happens when they threaten Earth. Across the solar system, human ships that had been hiding behind asteroids, inside the rings of Saturn, and in the shadow of Jupiter's moons, suddenly powered up their engines. The Karathi sensors went wild as 500 vessels, that had been completely invisible moments before revealed themselves. But these were not the crude metal ships that most young civilizations built. These vessels moved like living things, their hulls shifting and changing as they prepared for battle. Fleet Commander Minho commanded the destroyer group that had been waiting near Mars. His ships were smaller than the massive Korathi battleships, but they moved with a grace that made them look like dancers rather than warships. Minho's destroyers seemed to vanish and reappear in different locations, their stealth technology making them impossible to track. "Target their command ships first," Minho ordered his captains. "We have been studying their tactics for decades. They cannot fight effectively without their central control systems." The first Korathi admiral to die never even saw the weapon that killed him. One moment his flagship was leading the charge toward Earth, and the next moment it was expanding into a ball of superheated gas. The human destroyers struck like ghosts, appearing just long enough to fire weapons that cut through Korathi's shields, as if they were made of paper. Commander Yujin watched from her carrier as the enemy tried to adapt to the unexpected resistance. The Korathi were experienced fighters who had conquered most of the galaxy through superior numbers and brutal tactics. But they had never faced an enemy that knew everything about their weapons, their ship designs, and their battle strategies. "Launch." "All fighters," Yujin commanded. "Time to show them what we learned from watching their wars." The fighter craft that poured from the human carriers moved in ways that defied everything the Korathi knew about space combat. They seemed to bend space around themselves, appearing in multiple locations at once. Their weapons fired bursts of energy that followed impossible curves through space to strike targets that should have been protected by cover Captain Yunji. Coordinated the entire battle from her position aboard the Silent Storm. Her screens showed the locations of every ship in both fleets, and she could see the pattern of the fight as clearly as if she were watching pieces move on a game board. The human ships moved together like parts of a single organism, each vessel supporting the others in perfect coordination. "Sir, their third fleet is trying to break through toward Earth," she reported to Admiral Jiho. "Should I redirect the Mars Defense Group?" "No need," Jiho replied calmly. "Let them come. It is time they met our planetary defenses." The Korathi ships that managed to break through the outer defense lines found themselves facing something that no military force in the galaxy had ever encountered. Earth itself was armed. Weapons platforms that had been disguised as communication. Satellites opened fire with beams of coherent energy that could destroy a battleship with a single shot. The moon revealed missile launchers that had been built into its surface, firing projectiles that moved at impossible speeds and struck with the force of small asteroids, even Earth's space elevators. The giant structures that connected the planets, surface to orbital stations, were revealed to be weapons. They fired streams of particles accelerated to near light speed, creating beams of destruction that could slice through entire formations of enemy ships. The battle lasted exactly 6 hours and 14 minutes. When it ended, the most powerful military force in galactic history had been reduced to burning wreckage scattered across the solar system. Less than 300 Korathi ships managed to escape, and most of those were too damaged to fight again. Admiral Jiho looked out at the debris field that had once been an unstoppable fleet. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," he told Captain Yunji. "Tell them that Earth is no longer silent. Tell them that anyone who threatens our world will face the same fate as the Korathi." The message that went out to every civilization in the galaxy was simple, clear. The humans had not just been listening and learning. They had been preparing for war, and they were very, very good at it. Ambassador Seo Kajin walked slowly toward the center of the Great Hall where the Galactic Council had met for over 1,000 years. The chamber was enormous, with seats rising in circles around a central platform where speakers addressed the gathered representatives of hundreds of worlds. For 3 centuries, there had been an empty space in the seating area marked for Earth, but no one had ever expected it to be filled. Now, as Seogin stepped onto the speaker's platform, every eye in the chamber was fixed on him. The crystalline Vorthok shifted nervously in their mineral seats, their bodies catching and reflecting light in anxious patterns. The Nexari collective consciousness buzzed with worried thoughts shared among their delegates. Even the ancient Solari beings of pure energy who rarely showed emotion flickered with what might have been concern. Honored representatives, Seok-jin began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. I stand before you today not as a supplicant requesting membership in your council, but as the voice of a world that has been watching and learning from your mistakes. In the diplomatic viewing area, Hanam monitored the reactions of different species through her advanced sensors. Her job was to track who might become allies and who would likely remain enemies. She watched as representatives from smaller worlds leaned forward with interest while the major powers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. For 300 years, you have ruled this galaxy through fear, Seochin continued. You have used superior technology to force weaker species into unfair agreements. You have stood by while aggressors conquered peaceful worlds. You have created a galaxy where might makes right, and where the strong prey upon the weak. The Korathi representative, one of the few survivors of their recent defeat, stood up angrily. You dare to lecture us after destroying our fleet? Speak of peace while wielding weapons that make our most advanced technology look primitive. Seokajin turned to face the Korathi delegate directly. Your fleet was destroyed because it came to our world with the intention of enslaving or killing our people. We defended ourselves. There is a difference between aggression and self-defense, though I understand your species has forgotten that distinction. In another part of the chamber, Trade Minister Dongmin was quietly meeting with representatives from 17 different worlds. These were species that had been forced into unfavorable trade agreements by the major powers, civilizations, that had been waiting for someone strong enough to offer them a better choice. Earth offers fair partnerships, Dongmin explained to a delegate from the methane-breathing Zilani. We have resources and technology to share, and we ask only for honest trade in return. No forced labor, no tribute payments, no surrender of sovereignty. The Zilani delegate's breathing apparatus hissed with what might have been relief. For 2 centuries, we have been forced to sell our atmospheric processors to the Vorthok at prices that barely cover production costs. You offer a fair price? We offer market value, Dongmin replied. What something is actually worth, not what someone with a bigger military can force you to accept. Back on the main platform, SEO Chin was addressing the heart of the matter. Earth has spent decades studying every species in this galaxy. We know your technologies, your cultures, your strengths, and your weaknesses. We could have used this knowledge to conquer you, as many of you have conquered others. Instead, we choose to offer you something different. The ancient Solari representative, a being of shifting light and energy, spoke without moving to the platform. Their voice resonated through quantum fields that made the air itself vibrate with their words. What do you offer that we have not already achieved through our own power? Hope, Seokajin answered simply. Hope for a galaxy where species advance through cooperation rather than conquest. Hope for worlds where the strong protect the weak, instead of exploiting them. Hope for a future where every civilization can reach its full potential without fear of being destroyed by those who see them as threats. Hana watched as representatives from dozens of smaller worlds began to whisper. Among themselves, these were the species that had been overlooked or oppressed by the major powers. They were hearing something they had never expected to hear in the Galactic Council chambers. The Vorthok Prime Crystalline, the oldest and most respected member of their species, slowly rose from his seat. His voice chimed like distant bells when he spoke.
Wow.
Earth has demonstrated military power that exceeds our own. Yet you come here speaking of cooperation rather than demanding surrender. Why should we believe your intentions are genuine? Because, Seokjin replied, we have had the power to conquer this galaxy for 20 years, and we chose not to use it. We could have revealed ourselves as conquerors, but we chose to reveal ourselves as neighbors. We could have demanded tribute, but we chose to offer trade. We could have ruled through fear, but we choose to lead through example. Over the following days, Hana coordinated meetings between Earth's representatives and delegations from across the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves sitting at the same table, discussing cooperation instead of conquest. Trade agreements that had been forced upon weaker worlds were renegotiated on fair terms. The galaxy was changing, not through force or fear, but through the simple, revolutionary idea that different species could work together for mutual benefit. Earth's children began to spread among the stars, but they came as teachers and partners, not as conquerors. The silent world had finally spoken, and its voice carried a message that resonated across the cosmos. The age of rule by fear was ending, and the age of cooperation had begun.